good evening, it's Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 4th of January. And hasn't been too long, has it? And we're going to have to go back to France. President Emmanuel Macron is in trouble again, as his chief press officer has announced is going to resign at the end of January. This is Sylvain Faure. And also it's now rumoured that his chief strategist could be leaving him as well. Now, basically what Macron has done, he has surrounded himself by a coterie of advisors who have been with him since basically 2015, 2016, and they have formed a very tight team. And by these two people leaving, and of course, you know, it's a pretty good indication, because these kind of advisors will, they'll ride with you to the top, but as soon as you start slipping, they will disappear pretty darn quickly. So not only is this on Macron's plate, also Marine Le Pen is absolutely surging in the polls, and also there is an underlying problem that is starting to percolate to the surface aside from the Yellow Vest protests. So the other huge problem that Macron has is these sprawling ghettos that are all over France, and they are just an absolute breeding ground for crime, for radicalization, for terrorism, and they have basically spun out of control. And Macron has freely admitted that they have lost the drug war and they have lost the terrorism war. Now, of course, you may be wondering why I'm focusing on Macron and France and the plight of France. And the reason is that France is a very important country in Europe. Not just economically, it is the second largest economy in the European Union, next to Germany. But Germany is thought of traditionally as the fatherland, and France is thought of as the motherland. And so these are two very founding cultures within the European community. And if France were to collapse, if Macron was forced to step down, there could be unknown consequences given all of the unrest that's taking place right now. And anyways, there's some articles that I found that I think you might find interesting. So let's go to those, and I'll come back and do a quick wrap up. Okay, here we go. So here we go. Bloomberg, turmoil on Team Macron as press chief abandons ailing president. French President Emmanuel Macron will be forced to revamp his communications team after his top advisor announced he is quitting at the end of the month. Press chief Sylvain Faure is leaving the Élysée Palace for personal reasons, officials at the president's office said Thursday. The 41-year-old leader could lose a second key aide in the coming weeks, with Europe 1 Radio reporting that the strategy chief, Ismaël Emilien, Macron's strategy chief since 2014, is also seeking to resign. An Élysée press officer declined to comment on Emilien's situation. Faure's departure comes with Macron's popularity on the slide, as his plans for sweeping reforms opposed by the Yellow Vest protesters who blocked highways and demonstrated in Paris last month. Well, that's actually a bit of a misnomer, because it was right across France and into Belgium and Holland. Whilst Macron has targeted European elections in May to show that he remains a political force and not a political farce, those are my words, his efforts to combat the rising tide of nationalism have been hit by a series of setbacks. The Élysée press officer gave no indication of who will replace Faure and offered few details about how the team will be set up after his departure. Sébastien Daillet, the deputy communications aide who has been in Macron's team since he was economy minister in 2014, will stay at the palace, according to Macron's office. After voting from the periphery of French politics to seize the presidency in 2017, the past year has posed a major test to his resilience, with the defection of key ministers, questions about his handling of a scandal over his personal bodyguard, a series of communications blunders, and the Yellow Vest revolt against economic hardship outside the capital that is still simmering away. Is Emmanuel Macron having a meltdown? Emmanuel Macron was elated when France won the World Cup in July. The photograph of him leaping out of his seat at the Moscow Stadium showed a leader at the peak of his power. Or so he thought. Ever since then, he's been bumping back to earth. Last week, the French president took the unusual step of retiring to Honfleur for 4 days rest and recuperation. His face has changed. He is marked by the weight of power, confided one of his team. Another expressed concern about the president's weight loss. Caught off guard by the flurry of speculation concerning his health, Macron emerged from his retreat to tell locals that all is well, so don't worry, I'm not slowing down. But his appearance hasn't stopped the press from gossiping about his drawn features and first grey hairs. Macron's weariness is not just down to his workload. Since July he's suffered one setback after another. Some have been serious, others less so, but together they've eroded his aura of invincibility. Most surprising of all, given his poise in the first few months of his presidency, many of the setbacks have been of his own making. None more so than Benalla affair, the scandal that erupted 3 days after the World Cup final. Footage were broadcast of the president's bodyguard, Alexandre Benalla, beating up a protester during a May Day parade. The public were appalled, not just at Benalla but at Macron's advisers who tried to lie their way out of the crisis. In doing so, they stripped Macron of his moral authority. He was no longer the new president for a new France. He was just another president who abused his position and then tried to cover up his misdemeanors. How could Macron have been so stupid over Benalla? Daniel Cohn-Bendit, the former Euro MP who is in Macron's entourage, has said that the president and his wife liked and trusted Benalla, but he was an organiser, a confidant and someone who could lighten the mood with a wisecrack. They didn't want to lose him, and that misplaced loyalty clouded Macron's judgment. Perhaps, too, there was arrogance involved. The comparisons with Jupiter and the Sun King, the invitation to the White House, the sense that he was emerging as the strongman of Europe. Had he begun to believe the hype? Macron spent his first year in power hectoring and lecturing people, and his leadership style alienated some of his ministers. First to resign was Nicolas Hulot, the popular environment minister who announced his decision in a live radio interview in August, citing his frustration with government policy. Others followed. Laura Flessel, the sports minister, and Gérard Collomb, the experienced minister of the Interior, who told journalists that there was a lack of humility in the president's administration, warning that if he doesn't change, he'll end up isolated. And that's exactly what is happening now, not just within his own administration, but also within the EU, where Macron has few friends among the other 27 leaders. And since coming to power, he has insulted Poland, Hungary and Italy. His cherished ambition of forging a new alliance with Germany is dying alongside Angela Merkel's political career 14 months after outlining his vision of a profound transformation of the EU. Macron increasingly looks like the only leader who still believes in the Brussels project. Last week, he used a newspaper interview to warn of the spread of a nationalist leprosy across Europe. Macron likes the leprosy metaphor. He used it in June when making a veiled reference to Matteo Salvini, the Italian interior minister, who is seen in Paris as a dangerous populist because of his hardline approach to mass immigration. Macron, by contrast, is the progressive, or so you would have us believe. In truth, he's making little progress in his own country. In late September, his approval rating dropped to 29%, with arrogant and superficial the words most commonly used by those polled to describe the president. And of course, who is taking immense advantage of this is Marine Le Pen. Macron loses out in polls as Le Pen surges forward. And here she is, Marine Le Pen. France's far-right Reassemblement Nationalist RN party has overtaken President Emmanuel Macron's centrist party in the latest poll of voting intentions ahead of the 2019 European elections. This poll, taken out by the Institut Français d'Opinion Publique, shows that Macron's party has fallen to 19%, while Marine Le Pen, formerly the National Front, rose to 21%. France has lost the fight in drug-ridden suburbs amidst Emmanuel Macron. France has lost the fight against drug trafficking in many suburbs, warned Emmanuel Macron, as shocking images of masked gunmen opening fire in Marseille in a brutal daylight murder highlighted the uphill task he faces. Amateur footage of police clashing with Kalashnikov-wielding gangsters in the southern port city came as Mr. Macron unveiled new measures for the country's most deprived districts. Local officials in some of these say they are at a loss as to how to tackle poverty, drug running and Islamic fundamentalism. Many homegrown terrorists have come from such districts, while some mayors making waves in recent months by resigning, saying their job has just become too difficult. Associations and leftist MPs have accused Mr Macron, 40, of glossing over the poorest areas of France since his election in May 2017, focusing instead on business and the rich. The French president admitted he had lost the battle against drug dealing in many housing estates, pledging to finalise a plan to tackle the problem in July. Macron confessed that Islamic radicalism had also won in some neighbourhoods and was in the process of winning in others. So those articles to me were actually a bit of an eye-opener. I didn't quite realise. I knew that there were some problems in the inner city ghettos in Paris, but I didn't realise that this was going on right across France. And you can only disenfranchise people for so long. France had originally brought over many of these immigrants as cheap labour, and they never gave them status. They never allowed them to become French citizens. They were marginalised, the wages were poor, and so they became ghettoised, and so they had to lead the rough life. And now these places have become extremely dangerous. And not only is it dangerous to enter these places if you don't know your way around, but also it's extremely dangerous as a training ground for terrorism. And as you can see, it's pretty hard for police to go up against Kalashnikovs. Okay, so basically these areas are completely isolated. There is training going on in there, and there is a never-ending supply of alienated, disenfranchised immigrants now who are finding it hard to get work, find accommodation, and basically finding a much more hostile environment from the local French people. And so, of course, they flock to these ghettos. The word passes pretty quick that there will be a place for you there. And let's face it, when you've got nowhere else to go, you're desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. Okay, well, if you've enjoyed this little video, please like and subscribe below. And click that big red button. That really helps my channel when you do that. And once again, thank you so much for joining me on this journey, this conversation, this narrative, and also a very special welcome to any new subscribers to the channel. I'm going to try and keep this interesting and keep you up to date on all of these things going on around the world. In the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a great weekend, and I'm sure I'll be making a couple of videos over the weekend too, so we shall talk very soon. So you take care, and we'll see you. Bye.